good morning or good afternoon, or if, like our lovely guest, you are across the pond today. Let me just stop that screen share. So as usual, you guys will have your mics off tonight because we have an expert joining us in the Zoom room, but please put your cameras on so you can see each other and we can see who's here. So thank you so much for being here tonight. You're very welcome. Tonight, we are going to be working on our self-love levels because we are joined by Sarah Sapora, personal growth teacher, author, and self-love mentor, whose day job is teaching self-love to plus-size women old enough to remember life before the internet, which I love. So tonight, Sarah is going to be sharing her story and introducing us to her Soul Archeology system and book, which I've been sharing a bit on Instagram if you've seen, and teaching us how to create a self-love to-do list. So that's going to encourage us to accept and take care of ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever you need. That the idea tonight is we're going to kind of find out what you need and look at some strategies and tactics, both very important, of kind of like making sure you're taking care of that. So in case you don't know, I'm Tony and I'm your host tonight and the founder of the Self-Help Club, which is a community, a book club, and a platform all about celebrating self-help and personal growth and working on ourselves and our self-health. Most of you have been here before, so I think you know the score with regards to what we're doing admin-wise. Mics are off, cameras on, and we'll be using the chat box to chat. So why don't you introduce yourself in the chat? Who are you? Where are you? What does self-love mean to you? And I will introduce our special guest. Sarah, welcome. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And I see Teresa and Karen and Jen and Sue and Catherine and Gil and Rachel and Cheryl and Noreen and Joe and Francis and Karen and Christy and Tammy and a whole bunch of other people. And I am just so glad to be with you here today to have a vulnerable and honest chat with you about what self-love is and what isn't, and hopefully how you can use it to create a self-loving life and a more badass, liberated, awesome version of you.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's important to know what it isn't as well as what it is, isn't it? Just before we went on air, you were talking to me about some definitions, and I'm very pleased that we're going to do that. Yeah, because self-help speak, as we know, guys, we talk about this quite a bit. Sometimes it can be a bit problematic in the idea of like, we want to be our best self. Are we trying to fix ourselves? And I think if you're here with me and if you're part of this community, I think you understand that we can want to be better. I don't know if that's the right word, Sarah, you let me know. We can want to improve, but we can still accept where we are. And that seems like the ultimate, it's like the ultimate kind of paradox, but actually, I think that's where most of us want to get to. Sure. So Sarah's happy to answer your questions as we go. So just drop any in the chat box. Make sure you use, take advantage of having this wonderful expert in our Zoom room tonight. But Sarah, tell us, first of all, just so we get an idea, kind of where are you in the world and how are you today?
Well, right now I am here in my home office in Las Vegas, Nevada, and my 110-pound foster fail, who thinks that she's a lap dog, who is absolutely not a lap dog, is somewhere near me snoring, so I can't guarantee that she won't pop up. Like I was introduced, I'm a self-love mentor and a teacher, and I run live events. And the demographic that I tend to hang out with the most is, as I love it and refer to it, plus-size women old enough to remember life before the internet. And regardless of whether or not you're plus size, if you remember life before the internet, you know why it's important that we like identify that, because how we consume media and how we consume content is dramatically different if you remember what it was like before AIM and chat rooms and all that stuff. I also want to share something with you guys right now. This right here is the first time that I am coming back to teach and serve since my dad died literally 1 month ago today. And so I am incredibly comfortable being vulnerable with you, because I think it is very important for all of us to realize that life is sticky and messy. And if we wait for life to not be sticky and messy in order to show up, then we will be waiting for something that never happens. And so much of what I want to talk about and share when we talk about self-love is the idea that we are not a before and an after. We are never this broken, before, where we're miserable and need to be fixed and unworthy of love. And this has nothing to do with size or weight or wanting to make changes in your health or anything like that, right? But so much of what we think about in self-help land is the idea that in a before, we're broken. And once we've done the work, once we've gone to the workshop or done the program or conquered whatever it is, we're healed and we're fixed and we'll never have to deal with our own shit again. And then we're worthy and then we're perfect. And life just doesn't work that way. Life is birth and death at the same time. It is pain and pleasure in the same sentence. And it's the ability to realize that we can be radically self-accountable and radically self-loving and still want to grow and evolve at the same point in time. So I am happy to be here messy and sticky with you. And if I happen to tear up, then I tear up. I'm sure there's everybody here who's understood loss of some kind and pain. Like, we are humans and we are having this shared human experience, and we can use that as a way to bring us closer. So that is where I am. I'm in the getting my head out of my ass stage, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later when I talk about a self-love to-do list and I actually share with you how I'm putting that into practice. But what I like to say and what I love to teach people is that self-help and self-love means shit unless it exists in the real world. Okay. And I have tried all the things. I have done all the things, right? I have paid for all the retreats. Like, I get it. I really do. It's freaking fun. It is fun and it's dopamine and it feels great. But if you cannot take your practice from woo and turn it into do, if you can't go from just the theory to the actual concrete change, you're just going to stay caught in that cycle of endlessly searching for a new solution to fix something that wasn't broken with you in the first place. So here's what you can expect when you hang out with me. First off, I will probably say fuck. It's gonna happen. So I will try not to say it a lot, but sometimes it happens and I'll do my best. You can also expect me to be imperfect, and I'm okay with that. You can also expect me to be very vulnerable and to speak clearly and from the bottom of my heart, because I am not a therapist. I am not a fancy life coach. What I am is a woman who has been dramatically unhappy in her life, who has spent decades giving away little pieces of herself in order to feel more loved, and who got tired of that and realized as I was walking into my 40th birthday that I had literally no sense of self, I had no self-esteem, and I had no idea who I was for me. I knew who I was as everybody else needed me to be. And I have been varying degrees of plus size my entire life, and I have eaten my fear away and screwed my fear away and shot my fear away. And I have done all the things to try and feel more lovable. And the only stuff that has really allowed me to dig deep has been radical soul work that has allowed me to see the patterns that I've participated in, the things that I've done, and all the shame I felt I deserved to carry for years, and learning how to move through that. So radical vulnerability and sharing that is the only real superpower and gift I have to share with you. And so that's what you can expect from hanging out with me, if you haven't figured that one out just yet. So nice
it's an awesome superpower.
Nice to meet you, and I'm just so glad to be here with you.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I'm sorry you're going through this about your dad. But we're happy to have you here. And it's a kind crowd. There'll probably be a few tears on all boxes, I think.
I'm good at that.
But I do love to ask people, really, because I started self-help just as a way to help people improve their relationship with themselves. So I love to ask people, like, do you have a word or a phrase that sums up your relationship with yourself generally, like currently? Maybe not like right now while you're in the thick of it, but you just talked about how you kind of went from not really having any of that kind of self-love, self-respect. So what is there a word now that you would use to kind of to sum up how you feel about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm deeply committed to living a self-loving life.
Mm.
May I use it as a little bit of a segue so that that makes sense to people? Is that
Feel
okay?
free. Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
So, uh, when we say the word self-love, you probably have your own idea of what that means. Now, you guys are hanging out in this crowd, so you're probably pretty savvy. So you don't buy the whole bath bombs as self-love thing that were sold, right? You know to go beyond the Instagram post of the relatively slender gal who's poking her very normal fat and saying, I love myself. You know that self-love goes deeper than that, right? But I have a very specific definition of self-love. And self-love to me is any thought that I think or any action that I do that connects me to my ultimate you. Now, this is another word that in some variation or form you guys have heard of before, right? You've heard Gary Zukov and your ultimate you. You've heard highest self, greater power. Everybody's got an expression. I have ultimate you, but I have a very specific definition of that. And my ultimate you is not defined by my weight, the size of my boobs, how much money I'm making, whether I'm single or divorced. Doesn't have anything to do with that. My ultimate you is defined by two things. First, my ability to ask myself and answer and connect to myself and say, what am I feeling at any given moment? Two, my ultimate you is defined by my commitment to following through to have my own back with self-love. So the greatest version of myself, my ultimate you, the most authentic, real version of me is not defined by my weight or my income or anything, but on two things. One, do I bullshit myself when I ask myself how I feel? How self-aware am I? How self-aware are you? How keen is your ability to at any given time say, how am I feeling, and to understand what's going on? And two, my commitment to supporting that with actions and thoughts. So most of my life, and I had no idea I did this, you guys, absolutely none. So I refuse to be embarrassed about it anymore. Most of my life, I self-abandoned nonstop. I did it as currency. It was how I had relationships with people. It was how I gained an understanding of what my value was, right? Now, when I say I self-abandoned, what I meant is that in real time, I was given a choice to either have my back or not. And usually I chose to not have my back if it was for the benefit of someone else. I people pleased. I downplayed myself. I told people it was okay when it wasn't okay. I told dudes that I was super happy just banging it out when I was desperate to be seen and hugged. I lied to myself about my bank account, right? I spent a lifetime self-abandoning until I realized that I had nothing that was me. I had nothing. I was so terrified that this was all my life was going to be. And so when I say, how do I define my life right now? You really only have two choices in my eyes. You can be self-abandoning, or you can live a self-loving life. And when you live a self-loving life, you are prioritizing your self-love over discomfort. You are prioritizing self-love over self-abandoning. That doesn't mean that you're being selfish. That doesn't mean that you don't care about other people. That doesn't mean that you don't give to other people. What it means is that you are choosing to serve yourself for your growth and greater good, as opposed to abandoning yourself in order to get that feeling of belonging. So for me right now, I'm either living a self-loving life or I'm not. Now, the great part of that means I don't have to be perfect in order to do that. I don't have to get shit right all the time. I don't have to look a certain way. All I have to do is be self-accountable. And the two things that I said before, and I'm going to use my fingers because I want you to keep remembering this. Thing one, I have to not bullshit myself. If I'm bullshitting myself, if I'm lying to myself about how I feel, if I'm not being truthful with myself, then I cannot be self-loving. And two, being committed to follow through, being committed to showing up for myself. I'm sure if I asked you to think about it, that you guys could come up with, at some version of your life, the version of you that you thought was the ultimate you. And if you're a woman and maybe you've ever struggled with your weight, you probably feel like that ultimate you version of you has to do with the person that looked the hottest and like got the most attention, right? But in that version of you, in that ultimate you, were you really truly serving yourself? So I describe my relationship to myself, and therefore what I hope for other people is, do you live a self-loving life? And that's not defined by your quest for perfection. It's not defined by you getting it right. It's not defined by how much money you make. It's defined by how self-aware you are and how committed to serving yourself you are with your actions and your thoughts.
Sarah, is it a regular practice for you to kind of ask yourself, how am I feeling like right now? Is it, yeah?
All the time. All the
Do you
time.
say it out loud in your head?
No, I say it in my head all the time.
Yeah.
And the way I approach this is I believe that self-love can be your roadmap and your guide. And not only that, but if you actually practice self-love and you prioritize living a self-loving life, you'll actually have a roadmap that takes you from theory to practice. It will take you from woo to do. If you ask yourself, what is hurting me right now? And you actually do something different, then you're going to move yourself forward. So when I teach self-love, what I teach is something called a self-love to-do list. And I know we're all over the place right now, and I apologize. So feel free to like rein me in whenever you want. But like, I teach people how to make a self-love to-do list because I like my check boxes. I'm not going to lie. I do. I like lists and I like tools. I probably have some ADHD in me. I like me some good tools, right? So anytime in my life that I feel like my head is up my butt, or anytime I walk into a new chapter, or I hit something difficult, or I'm struggling with self-care, or I go through something new, I sit down and I create a new self-love to-do list so that I can guide myself. And I ask myself, I start by saying, what is hurting me right now? And I write that out. And I answer the questions, even if it's ugly stuff. I am brutally honest with myself. And then I think about how it is that I want to feel in life and what is keeping me from feeling that way. What am I doing, whether it's subconscious or not, that is keeping me from feeling the way that I want to feel? And I literally make a checklist. I have a 4 or 5 step process that gets me from this freaking hurts to this is a list of things I can do right now that are self-love. So at any given time, I know exactly what I need to do for myself. I'm going to give you guys an example for me and what's going on in my life right now so that it sounds more practical, right? Anybody who's been here, has anybody ever experienced loss or grief of a parent or a partner? I don't know if anybody ever has. I'm new to grief. I have lost people that I love before, but I've never lost a parent. So I wasn't sort of prepared for this sort of feeling of like numbness and nothingness that has sort of come over my existence. And I started to self-sabotage a little. I started to lean on food. I started to lean on sex. I made a field day at Labor Day sales of buying shit that I didn't need. Like, Lord knows why I needed 5 pairs of ballet flats without arch support, but I bought them, right? So I leaned on all of my coping mechanisms. And then I turned around and I realized and I said, this is not self-loving. You're not serving yourself. Yes, you're coping and this is feeling good in the moment. It is giving you the dopamine you need to make it through the day, but it's not self-loving. So I created a new self-love to-do list. I sat down and I asked myself, what is hurting me right now? What am I really feeling? And then I decided how I wanted to feel. I have a checklist with a big bunch of feeling words. And I decided that right now in this chapter, what I need to feel is self-respect. I need to feel self-respect, and I need to get really clear on what that means. Because if I just say, I want to feel more self-respect, and then I leave it at that, I'll never do shit. I won't. I just won't. Life will become more important. I'll never do anything to help myself. So I go through my process, and then I literally end up with a list of like 6 to 10 things that cultivate feelings of self-respect for me right now. And that includes everything from having a certain amount of sleep every night, to going back to the doctor and getting a mammogram, to not spending money I don't have, to allowing myself to still take a break from social media. And I do this so that at any given time, I can get practical on what self-love means for me. I don't have to guess. I know what my priorities are. So in the middle of everything, when work is hectic and my boyfriend is screaming and everybody wants something and I feel like my head is up my butt, I have a little checklist. And if something that comes my way isn't on this checklist, then I get to say, peace out. That's not self-love for me right now. And anything that's on that checklist is my priority. So it becomes really easy for me to put a boundary in place and say, that's not self-loving, and this is self-loving. This is self-loving for me to do this. It's not about you. It's not about that. It's about what I need to feel more self-respect in my life. Does that kind of example help you guys? Because we're going to evolve and we're going to change in life. And as we grow, we're going to want to feel different things at different points in time in our life. But what we can always be is connected to ourselves. We can always find a way to use self-love to help us into our ultimate you, if we're committed to doing it.
I think it's really important that you're talking about how when life changes, as life will change, we know that's the only constant, right? Your list changes, and you use the word tools, and we love a tool. Jen's written, I love a roadmap. We love tools. We love kind of like checklists and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, making sure that you're using the right tool, I suppose, for the right situation. So I think in your work, it seems like it's really important to identify the pain and identify the feeling, because then you're able to move through it. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that that's not easy. And I know that I have spent my whole life trying to avoid how I felt. Okay, because it didn't feel good to feel the way I felt, whether it was avoiding anger at my parents or avoiding feeling anger at a college boyfriend who was relatively sexually coercively abusive, or whether it was, spending my 20s using casual sex or food to numb feelings, right? Like, feeling shitty feelings sucks, and we don't want to feel them. And it's okay to not want to feel them. It really, truly is. But if we can't see what hurts us, then we can't give ourselves what we need to move through that. And so when you asked me earlier, do I regularly ask myself what I'm feeling? Nonstop, because that process of asking plus answering plus taking action, that's a muscle. And at first, when you start to practice it, it feels like walking backwards on chocolate pudding, because you're not used to doing that. But the more you practice your self-love muscle, and I know that that sounds dirty, and I'm fine with that, but the more you practice that process of asking and answering and taking action, the easier it gets. I have some women that I've been with at retreats or in groups for years, and the first time they sat down to do a self-love to-do list, they all but gave me their middle fingers, really. And some of them probably did, because that process of asking and answering was hard. And then 2 years later, they've done it 5 or 6 or 7 times, and they're like, oh, this makes so much sense. Duh. Self-love takes work, guys. You don't just wake up and feel it. And that's the thing that I think is so easy to get seduced, because we're sold this idea of self-love that if we buy the stuff, or if we do the program, or we go to the group, or if we lose the weight or whatever it is, that suddenly we're going to wake up and it's going to be unicorns and purple.
And sometimes it's we're kind of like not tricked. We trick ourselves into not doing the thing because we're like, oh, listen to our body. I feel tired. But actually sometimes that's the brain trying to keep us safe, isn't it? So
Yep.
there's definitely a line, isn't there, between so taking care of yourself is sometimes doing the stuff you don't want to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Listen, I actually just recorded a podcast about this, and I hope that it will be out within the next week or so. But I did like a 30-minute primer on self-love, and I shared 4 really icky but essential truths about self-love. And I also cover this in my book, but one of them is that self-love, sometimes it really freaking sucks, and sometimes self-love isn't fun. A lot of times the things that are the most self-loving are also the things that you really don't want to do.
Yeah.
Now, at the same point in time, because this is really important, self-love doesn't mean hustle culture, right? So we're also trained in the same way to think that doing it all, being it all, and blah, blah, blah makes us the best version of ourselves. And sometimes the most self-loving things that we can do are inactive. So really what it's about is about our ability to be honest with ourselves, because self-love, I'm using a lot of the word self right now, and I understand how selfish that sounds in general, but we're talking about ourselves, right? Self-love is self-accountable.
Mm.
Now, sometimes when you're being self-accountable, you're going to give yourself permission to let go and let your hair down and indulge and enjoy. And sometimes self-love means doing the exact opposite. It means looking at the hard relationship. It means going to the doctor that you don't want to go to. It means not buying the things that you don't want to do, right? Because self-love is in service of our ultimate you. And when we are in alignment with self-love, we are self-aware. That's why it's not about weight or being perfect or having all of our shit together. It's, are we self-aware? And you can be really messy and sticky and icky and be incredibly self-aware and incredibly honest with yourself. Do you see the difference in that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think maybe it'd be good if we kind of, like, you talk about like the jumping off point. So if you're going to start the self-love to-do list, it's like, where do we start from?
Yeah.
So I've been looking at the book today, and so step 1, start where it hurts. And you're right, it's like we don't want to do that, but
no,
that's where we go.
Listen, if you guys, if you, in the general sense, if any of us want to make change, if we're not willing to look at what hurts, then we cannot make change. We cannot. So for me, I only realized I had to make change when I was really scared of 2 things. One, I was physically scared of dying. Okay, like clearly I'm a plus size woman, and my relationship to food is a amazing work in progress. But I have been heavier than I'm at right now, like to the point where the scope of my life was getting smaller based on my body's limitations. The way I say this to people who've never been heavy is, I couldn't walk a single block without stopping in pain, and I would have to sort of like gamble with my body, like, can I take this step off of 9th Avenue onto the street, or are my knees going to give out and buckle on me, right? So my body was getting to the point where like I had to do something. But even more than that, because like you would have think that would have been enough, but I was kind of used to that frog in boiling water. I was just really, really scared because I was in my late 30s and everybody I knew had gotten married and had kids and was going on vacations. And I was just having the same surface level relationships again and again and again and again. And all that I wanted was to give and receive love. And I got so fucking scared that was all my life was ever going to be. And at that point in time, I wasn't able to be that self-aware. I didn't have that muscle built up. I didn't have it. But I knew that where I was hurt. And so I started by just being honest with what was hurting me, and I stopped doing the thing that was hurting me. And that was all. And that was the initial layer of my soul archaeology. But you can't do that unless you start where it hurts. What are you pretending not to see? What are you pretending not to see in your life, guys? Is there something that you feel that you're pretending doesn't bother you? What are you pretending not to know or feel or see? And I don't say that with any any judgment, you guys. But if you can't see that stuff, then you can't change through it. You can't grow through it.
Sure. So I think I would invite everybody tonight to just to think about that. So what are you pretending not to see, feel, know? And then that's a good starting point to then kind of to create the self-love to-do list that's actually going to work for you. If you feel like you want to share in the chat, then feel free, then you can get some advice. Otherwise, just for yourself, this is a good place to start. And then I think, Sarah, let's talk about then, like, so soul archaeology and the idea of that, like you just touched there on its layers. And so the idea of like the digging, and I love that. It's just like layer by layer, things are going to kind of come to the surface, and it doesn't all need to happen tonight at this interview.
So, if you guys have spent any time on social media, there's no doubt in my mind that you haven't seen the before and after picture, whatever it is, whether it's the weight loss or the hair transformation, or before I found this coach, after I got this coach, right? We are conditioned and sold, and we have been since we were kids, that we are a before and an after. Before we make the change and after we make the change. We're a lot like this highlighter. We're a straight line. This is before. We're broken, we're unlovable, we're fat, we're messy, we're single, we're undesirable. And then we start to do the shit. And then we're in progress. And then we get more social equity because we're working on whatever it is. And then we hit whatever it is this goal is we think is going to magically fix us. And then we're the after. And then we're really proud of ourselves, and then everybody else is proud of ourselves, and it feels really great until something happens in life that knocks us off our feet a little. And then all of a sudden, whatever it is starts to crumble a little. And if it's with your weight, maybe you start to gain some back, or if it's habits, maybe you start to go towards those. And the next thing you know, you're feeling worse than you felt before. Guys, we are not a before and after. Now, that doesn't mean that we cannot grow and evolve and change. We can, and that's accessible to all of us, whether that's physical change, spiritual change, emotional change. That is accessible to all of us in some way, shape, or form, based on health privilege, body privilege, all that stuff. But I want you to move away from that idea of before and after, and instead think of yourself as a big scrunchy and bunch of layers that all kind of wibbly wobbly on top of each other, because that's what life is. So the process I have, and it's what my book is called, it's called Soul Archeology. And that's that idea that when you realize something is hurting you, you want to fix it all at once. Right? Like, I don't know if you ever had that moment, like where I can think about it related to weights, because that's like an easy example, right? But like, I really hate that none of my jeans fit me. And then like tomorrow I just go on this super restrictive diet and I go to the gym 9 hours a day and boom, 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 right? We go, this hurts me. And now I'm going to hyper fast fix it. That's not life. Life is about brushing layers off one at a time. So instead, I want you to think of yourself as being an archaeological dig. Okay? In my book, I say, this is when I want you to think about me as being fat Angelina Jolie with very perky boobs and no under boob sweat and great hair. And I'm standing in some Balinese jungle and I'm going in search of an artifact. And you get to the dig site and you look at the dirt and you say, okay, what is going on with this dirt? What do I see? What do I smell? What's going on? And you stand on it and you observe. And then you make a little change and you start to brush the dirt off. And then you see like a finger. And you go, oh shit, I got a finger. What do I see about this finger? What do I learn? I'm going to hang out with this finger. I'm gonna like really study it. And then you brush another layer off where that finger was. And one at a time, you brush away the layers until what you have uncovered is yourself. So instead of it being a statue or a dinosaur fossil you're digging up, what you're unearthing is your ultimate you. If something hurts you, you look at it. You don't ignore it. What is hurting me right now? How does this feel? How am I contributing to this pattern? And you make a single little change, and then you live with that. And then you brush another freaking layer off. And then you look at that. And how does that make me feel? And what am I doing here? And one at a time, you unearth yourself. And the thing about life, guys, is that your shit is going to be your shit. What you struggle with at 20 is going to be the same stuff that you struggle with at 40 and at 50 and 60, because we all have our own shit. Our own shit is based on how we were raised, what our family of origin taught us about love, and all those patterns that were ingrained in us when we were younger. Those are ours, okay? We can make friends with them. We can unearth them. We can do an archaeology of our soul, and we can just get better at handling them. So instead of being a before and after, you're a squiggly, smushy mess of life's things happening all at once. So you're not going to dig yourself up in one layer. You have to do it one bit at a time. And that's what soul archaeology is about. An archaeology of your soul, of your own shit, of your coping mechanisms, of your habits, of the things you do and don't do, of your shame that you may not even realize you carry, of the ways you self-abandon. And you cannot possibly do all of that at once, because true transformation doesn't happen in an 8-week period. True transformation takes years, Now, you may experience and learn things in a lightning second. You may have a woman and go, oh shit, I just figured that out. But the application of that in your life, that's years of transformative work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. And I love let us know, guys. I think it's making, yeah, it is, people are loving the analogy. Do you know what I really enjoy as well about that? It's the idea that it's all precious. Like if you are Angelina Jolie and you're digging up some kind of ancient body from, I don't know, the Incas or something, you wouldn't throw something away just because it wasn't exactly the same as it's supposed to be, or it's all special and it's all got its place, hasn't it?
It all has its place, right? You guys, if you are, as long as you are being self-loving, as long as you are following the path of ask, answer, and action, then anything that you experience is data that you can learn from. Yeah. That's why it's not about getting it right, you guys. Listen, as long as you stick to that strategy and that practice of asking yourself honestly, and then answering yourself honestly, and then doing the best you can at any given time, you will move forward. I haven't told this story since my dad died, but I talk about it in the book, and it's something that I refer to all the time. Sorry. I tell a story about how my dad always used to say to me, you don't have to know what you want, Sarah T, but sometimes you just have to know what you don't want. And that stuck with me a lot, because I am a wacky creative who always kind of really sucked at top-down management and corporate world. But what I always figured out was, if I could identify what wasn't working for me, then eventually I'd figure out what would. Like if I turn around and I say, well, that isn't working for me. Green shag carpet in the house is not working for me. And as long as I rip up the green shag carpet and I replace it with something else, it doesn't fucking matter what I replace it with. As long as it's different, I'll find eventually what kind of flooring it is that I like. If I keep asking myself and answering, does this work for me? And then I take action through that. Ask, answer, and take action. And as long as you do that, you can trust that you will always be on the correct path.
Yeah. And the action, I think, is such an important part of that, isn't it? Because quite often that's the bit we miss out.
Yeah. Who to do? I mean, listen, we've all
Yeah.
done it, right? We've all paid. Well, I don't know if you have. I've paid my money for the really awesome experiences. I've gotten, I mean, Lord knows how many times I've bought a new notebook or planner or a new water bottle thinking it was going to be
You're in the
the
right place.
in my life,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, I feel like shit. Let's buy a new planner. I don't know why. It's going to be perfect now, right? But I mean, really, truly, if we don't get practical about growth and change, then it doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
that's why I use my self-love to-do list. And literally, I put it on my phone. I'll stick it on a sticky note,
Hmm.
you know, and I make those things really small.
Yeah.
If I don't, then I won't move forward. And listen, sometimes it's okay to not. Sometimes it's okay to go through periods where it's really hard to practice self-love. Look, for a couple of weeks right around the time of my dad dying, the best I had was to be messy and engage in some probably not great coping mechanisms. But the beautiful thing about self-love and the beautiful thing about you is as long as you're breathing, you can always return to self-love. Even if it's a practice you have fallen away from, you can return to it. As long as you're willing to look at what hurts you. Start where
Yeah.
it hurts.
Yeah. And I suppose, yeah, like you say, like when you are in a situation that you deserve to, it makes sense that you don't feel great and that you're not looking after yourself very well. I suppose it's not always self-abandoning if you are just dealing with the shit that's hitting the fan, but
Yeah,
it's moving yourself out of that when you feel ready.
sure. Listen, I have an expression, and I don't know you guys. I know the people in my community know that I have a dirty mind and that I make inappropriate jokes. And so I'm going to say this, and it's going to get your attention. And you may not like it, but you're going to understand it. Okay. So, what I ask people is, do they trust that they have their own back? Do you know and do you trust that at any given time you have your own back? You know what it means to support you. And then I talk to people about self-abandonment, which is something that most people don't even think about. In fact, they usually don't even understand it. But then I say, how do you cock block your own self-love? There's a child in the room that heard that, so I won't repeat it again.
I think he just arrived.
Okay. But you know what I'm saying when you say that. How
Yeah.
do you cut off and block your own self-love in ways that you probably, he heard worse. Teresa, I like you. You're my people. How do you participate in that process? Because there are probably dozens of ways, even more than that, that you block your own self-love that you don't even realize it. And again, coping is a part of life. Everybody copes. Coping is not necessarily bad for you. There's a difference between a coping mechanism and a coping skill. I actually just wrote about this too, because I was with everything with my dad, I did quite a bit of coping, and I realized how much I was leaning on like really bad Gerard Butler action movies and like really masculine dominant men on TV to like help me feel like I had a sense of control in the world. So I figured, oh, well, there's a thing. We might as well research that. And so there is a difference between coping mechanism and coping skill. Coping mechanisms are the things that we do probably defensively, that we learned how to do when we were younger as ways to keep us safe. Sometimes those things can be not helpful, whether it's drinking or self-abandoning, whatever. Coping skills are the ways that we proactively use self-love to help us cope. Coping is a part of life, guys. It's just when we're doing it, is it self-loving or is it self-abandonment? I know I sound like a broken record there, but I'm excited about that one. I like that one because,
No, that's great.
to be honest, guys, coping is life. Anybody who tells you to go through life without coping, they're not living life in any real way. Like, coping is part of life. Shit is a part of life. It just is. Your self-love has to exist in the real world. If you don't know how to stay self-loving when you have a coworker who you'd like to throat punch, but you know that throat punching that coworker would probably really be bad for you. If your self-love doesn't teach you how to deal with somebody whose head you want to smash through glass, You're not really going to do that, I know, but you understand that, right? Self-love cannot exist in the bubble of I make nut milk and I sit in the sunshine and do nothing all day long, right? Self-love has to exist in between kids that want your time and parents that need you to take them to the bathroom and bills that have to be paid. It's got to
Real
go from
life.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, real life. Who's relating to this? I can see people laughing and shaking their head and nodding a lot. So I feel like everybody is. And you're going to share your self-abandoning checklist with me, aren't you? With me to, so I can share it with the guys. So I'll share that with you guys on the app after this. So that's a whole checklist of lovely, juicy ways that we abandon ourselves, just to make
I forgot
sure.
what chapter it is in my book. Maybe it's chapter 8. It's the time when, you know, like if you ever go to retreat and like everything is really happy and then all of a sudden something happens and it's like, wah, 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 shit just got real. That's the self-abandonment day. So yes, I'm happy to share that with you guys, because again, if we, and I say this with love, as a gold medal self-abandoner, if we can't see the ways that we participate in the patterns that hold us back, we can't break free of them. Now, this doesn't mean that other people haven't wronged us. They probably have, okay? And I'm not doing this because, you know, you guys have seen this, right? There's two really big, and I'm being cliche here on purpose, there's like two different ways of thinking about things. One is sort of like victim mentality, where everything is happening to me because somebody else is hurting me. And then in the self-help world, there's also like a super hyper, it's all under my control. It's all there. And I am the complete director of my manifestation and destiny. Right? We've seen that too. It's right. Yeah. Just manifest it. Right. I cannot tell you how badly I deeply dislike when people tell me to just manifest it. Right. The truth is somewhere in the middle. And you know this. There is so much shit out there that we cannot control in any way, shape, or form. And we cannot control what other people have done to us in the past. All we can do is have some degree of control over ourselves. And even that is going to be dependent on our mental health, our physical health, our resources, right? Again, we have to make sure self-help isn't being privileged and ableist, right? Because some people are going to have an easier time prioritizing self-care than some people won't, right? So remember that all of our growth is relative for us. It's not to compare to anybody else, but I am telling you, in your own way, in a way that is accessible for you, you can use self-love to change the experience that you are having in your own life.
Thank you for sharing that. Let's get a little bit practical then. If anybody has any particular examples that they feel brave enough to share, when we just asked that question, we've got 10 minutes, just under 10 minutes left with this wonderful woman. So Jo did actually share earlier on that she is a people pleaser and she knows that that is hurting her. Would you have any advice on where to start?
Yeah. I mean, look, Jo, I'm not a therapist. And so what I feel that I can do is help somebody see their patterns. That's all I can do. I can help you learn to be self-aware. I cannot help you work through that stuff because it's not my stuff and I'm not trained to do that. But what I would say the first step to doing is really seeing how are you participating in the people-pleasing process. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm not saying that anything that any one of you have done when you were trying to feel loved is your fault, because it's not. It got you here. You did a good job. But Jo and all of us in specific, if we know we're participating in that process in some way, we have to get real clarity about it. In what situations do I find myself people pleasing? When does this come up? How am I feeling before I start people pleasing? How do I feel after? Is it only in certain circumstances? Is it only in certain dynamics? Jo, do an archaeology, do a dig as much as you are capable of seeing how you self-abandon by people pleasing. And if you start to look at those patterns, that will be your answers. And I say this to everybody, I believe in therapy. Get it? It's fucking great, you know, but come get assistance with what you need in mind. Imagine how cool and empowering it would be to turn around and say, hey, therapist, you know what? I've realized that I'm a people pleaser. And not only that, but I only people please with men, and I do it in this way, and these are the patterns that I've done. I would really love you to help me understand how I can do something else. What? That's magic. That's so fucking beautiful to be able to look at your own stuff and then to know that you're empowered to change it and evolve it and fix it. So for Joe and for anybody, if you know that something is happening, you've got to look at it and you've got to uncover it and get to know it really, really well.
Sarah, what's the most common behavior, I suppose, that people come to you with? Is it people pleasing?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's a single woman that comes to any of my retreats that doesn't identify with people pleasing in some way. You know, I mean, I think that's such a feminine, I think that's such a ingrained in our feminine currency in general is how can we please others as way to find value for ourselves. You know, a lot of the women that I work with are plus size, right? Varying degrees of plus size. So there's a lot that has to do with body image in the women that I work with as well too. A lot of self-loathing that comes with body and stuff. Now, again, that's not specific to just larger women, right? People of all sizes and men too, forgive me. Bodies of all sizes can struggle with self-loathing and shame and stuff. It just so happens that because I come in this package, I make it particularly safe for people who don't feel welcome in other spaces to share the nuances of how their body journey has impacted them. But honestly, I think many of us self-abandon in some way or another, and a lot of times it's people pleasing, especially if we're of a certain age and of a certain culture and of a certain generation, that's what our parents taught us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe's actually just written in the chat, oh my God, I've just realized it's men. I mean, that is gold, isn't it? Like you say, to be able to to have that awareness, because then you can use that information.
Listen,
well done, Joe.
I'm not scared. Let me rephrase that. I'm not scared of any of the stuff I've dug up. I have been ashamed of the stuff that I've dug up, because as you start to do your soul archaeology, you'll start to see some stuff. And if you have engaged in some challenging patterns, you may start to see some stuff that is really icky that you don't necessarily like. And you don't like what you think that makes you. But because of that, self-forgiveness is an essential part of your soul archaeology. It's essential. I'm not here to tell you that you have to forgive other people for the wrongs that you've done, that you feel that they've done in your life, but you do have to forgive yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to love the things that you've done, but carrying the weight and the shame of the stuff that you dig up, that is just going to perpetuate that before and after feeling of self-loathing that can't be loved through, can't be grown through.
I think it's important to recognize that as well, that some icky stuff will come up, probably, won't it? Yeah,
absolutely. Listen, again, I'm not here to push my book on you guys. Read it, don't. But in my book, I share with you the steps and the growth of soul archaeology, and that means the really icky moment that I sat and festered in the weight of all the things that I had seen that I have done in my life. And for me, a lot of that has to do with sex, and how I've treated my body and like how I've used my body as currency and stuff. But yeah, you know, self-forgiveness is essential. So what I hope to share is self-love as it exists in the real world, because we cannot deny that doing hard work is going to bring up hard feelings. No, it's going to. It should. It needs to, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole, if your self-help lives in a bubble, it can't actually help you in real life, right? If it doesn't acknowledge that sometimes you want to eat an entire bag of chocolate chips with a spoon at midnight because life sucks, and if it doesn't acknowledge that sometimes you're completely stretched beyond end because your kids need you and your parents need you and your partner needs you, and honestly all you want to do is sleep for 10 minutes, like if you can't, if your self-love won't allow you to exist in that ick, if it wants you to deny that ick exists, how's it going to help you in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I've just shared the link to the book and to Sarah's website. And Sarah, you have a podcast as well, right?
I do, yes. I've started a podcast. It's called Powered by Self-Love, and it's just going to be honestly 30 minutes or less, because who wants to listen for anything longer than that, right? Put it on when you're getting dressed in the morning, and it's just like a little digestible nugget of self-love that you can use to think about things. And I shared before that, look, this month, you guys, you are talking about how self-help relates to your body and your wellness and showing up for you. I'm happy to be a resource to you. So if on your platforms there are questions that you submit, I'll answer them. I'll answer them via email. Like, I'm here to support you in your journey and in your process of connecting your mind and your body, because self-love is physical, emotional, spiritual. It can be applied to whatever your ultimate you needs. And if for some people like me, it has to do with weight and intentional eating, that's fine. For some people, it may have to do with sexuality. That's fine. Like it can touch on every bucket of your life: financial, spiritual, physical, whatever, right? But I know that you had like a physical mind-body connection this month. And was it clear that this is a mind-body thing? Like, I just want to make sure that was clear, that this is all connected in some way, because you deserve tools to help you do that. I hope.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, that was a wonderful way to wrap it up, actually, because what we've been learning is our attitude will affect how well we are, how we heal. So it's kind of like having, and the idea that our brains just kind of they're just wild animals quite often, and so to be able to direct them in a self-loving way is just so important. So to understand the reasoning behind that, and then also from you though to understand kind of how we can do that is brilliant.
Sure. Yeah. And again, there are so many different applications, because self-love to Rachel, I see you. Self-love to you, Rachel, is going to be really different than what self-love is to Karen, right? And that may be different than what it looks like to Catherine, right? Because everybody here has individual needs, whether they're physical, emotional, spiritual, bodily, health-wise, right? So when you ask yourself what it is that you need, all I'm trying to do is help you come up with a framework that connects the mind to the action. But it's up to you to figure out what that ultimate you needs. And again, this is a process that I teach in more in depth in my book and work and stuff. But for now, just understand that your self-loving life, your commitment to self-loving life, can shape every facet of how you want to address your self-care in whatever way is relevant towards you.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think Jill summed it up really well. She sent me a message saying the process needs honesty. Like, it's like, be honest with yourself, right? Which I think is brilliant. So everyone's homework: ask, answer, action. The three A's. Yeah. And I'd love you to share them. And if you have any questions for Sarah, then share with me. And we're going to be sharing loads of great resources with you after this session. So thank you, Sarah, for being here. I really appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate you listening. And for those of you that shared your faces, thank you for sharing faces. And for those of you that listened, I hope I didn't offend you dramatically. And just thank you for showing up for yourselves, right? Because we're all here just trying to figure it out. So I appreciate you guys. Care Bear Stare.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, Sarah. And bye, guys. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you soon.